Footsteps upstairs. Footsteps echoed upstairs, even though I hadn't been up there in years. The sound came first as a faint creak, then another, slower, deliberate, each step landing as if someone or something was walking across the floorboards I'd long ago abandoned. I froze in the kitchen, the half-empty mug of tea trembling in my hand. The low hum of the refrigerator seemed to sharpen against the oppressive silence of the house. Outside, wind rattled the windows, but that was nothing compared to the measured rhythm of weight above me. I hadn't been upstairs since I moved back into the house years ago. The memories up there were brittle, fragile things I had tried to leave behind. Dust-laden, sun-faded photographs of people whose smiles had once meant everything. Rooms lined with furniture I no longer recognized, and a door at the end of the hall that I had never opened. I'd spent years convincing myself that the stairs, and what lingered above them, were a place I didn't need to confront. Tonight, it seemed the house disagreed. I set the mug down with more force than I intended, the clatter ringing through the kitchen like a bell. The sound of the footsteps stopped. For a heartbeat, I allowed myself a moment of relief. Perhaps my mind was playing tricks, a residue of anxiety, of too many sleepless nights spent worrying about nothing. But then came a single soft thump, followed by a dragging shuffle that rolled across the ceiling joists. Not a branch, not the wind. The sound carried weight, purpose. I leaned against the counter, pressing my palms flat to steady my shaking. The kitchen smelled of damp wood and old oil from the stove, mingling with the faint must of dust from rooms long sealed. I could feel the house settling beneath me, each creak and sigh of timber amplified by the tension coiling tight inside my chest. I told myself that no one could be up there. I lived alone. I had no pets. And yet, the floorboards protested in a pattern that only a living being could produce. I considered calling someone, anyone, but my phone lay upstairs, charging in the hall, unreachable. Even if I ran, I would have to pass the doorway, the threshold that led toward the staircase. I had avoided that part of the house for good reason. Memories that made the skin crawl, whispers in the dark that weren't ever real, or at least I had told myself they weren't. The decision to stay downstairs seemed less like caution and more like instinct, the same instinct that had kept me from looking back into rooms I had promised myself I'd never enter again. The footsteps began again, slow and deliberate. This time, I could hear the soft scrape of nails, or perhaps something metallic, against the old wooden banister. My pulse thundered in my ears. I pressed my hands over my mouth, as if muffling my own presence could make the sound stop. My skin prickled, a sensation of being watched crawling up the back of my neck. I wanted to tell myself it was the wind, a stray branch, a raccoon trapped in the attic. But the pattern, there was intention in it, a rhythm that defied coincidence. 2 steps forward, pause. 3 steps, pause. Then a faint dragging, as if someone or something were repositioning. I could almost sense its gaze, a cold, unblinking awareness from above. I remembered the room at the end of the hall, the one I had avoided for years. I had left it untouched, sealed, the door locked with an old latch that resisted prying fingers. The memory of the smell, old wood, decaying paper, and something else, something metallic, rose in my mind. I wanted to close my eyes, to forget it existed, but my awareness of the sound upstairs drew me forward, inexorably. A shadow shifted on the wall opposite the stairs, though nothing moved to cast it. My heart lurched, and I turned my head, expecting emptiness. But even that was a lie. The shadow pulsed, breathing in time with the footsteps above, stretching impossibly, folding over itself in ways that defied geometry. The footsteps paused, and the silence that followed was heavier than any sound. I could feel it pressing down through the floor, through the walls, through the ceiling joists, settling into my chest. My breath caught, and I realized the house was listening, attuned to my fear. I wanted to run, to flee to the street, to open the door and escape into the storm. But the front door was behind me, and I could sense, rather than see, the path blocked, closed by presence alone. The air in the living room had thickened, heavy with something unseen, a weight that made every movement an exertion. Then a faint, almost imperceptible whisper reached me. Not words, not quite, but syllables shaped like memory, like recollection. A name I had not spoken aloud in decades, one I had buried in the corners of my mind. I pressed my palms against my ears, tried to will it away, but the sound seeped through, threading into my consciousness. The steps resumed, descending now, though I had been sure they were confined to the upper floor. I could hear them brushing along walls, pressing over beams, tracing the contours of rooms I no longer recognized. A cold draft snaked around my ankles, brushing up my calves with the sensation of fingertips. I sank to the floor, trying to make myself small, invisible. My hands shook, scraping against the grain of the wood. The footsteps slowed, halted, paused at the threshold of the staircase. The silence was punctuated by a soft, deliberate exhale, a breath I could not place as mine or not mine. Then, almost impossibly, I felt it. A weight on the stairs just above me, leaning over the railing. Not solid, not quite physical, but there. A presence that pressed against the air, folded the shadows, bent perception. I did not dare to look up. My mind recoiled from confrontation, from recognition of what might be waiting. Minutes or hours passed. The storm outside softened into drizzle. Rain trickled down the roof, filling gutters, pooling along the foundation. The house returned to a semblance of quiet, but the weight lingered. Even the air itself seemed to hum, charged, pregnant with intention. I have not gone upstairs since. I do not plan to. And yet, sometimes, in the dead silence of evening, I hear a single step echo, soft, deliberate, familiar, and I realize, with a chill that settles deep in my chest, that whatever is upstairs is patient, and it has not forgotten. It waits. Unseen eyes. Her phone kept receiving photos of her house taken from outside. First, I thought it was a prank. A friend, bored, sending images snapped through her cracked blinds or off the street. But the first photo was taken at night. The amber glow of my living room lamp spilled onto the porch, reflected off the rain-slicked driveway. And I knew, absolutely knew, that I had been alone. I had locked the doors. I had checked. The air smelled faintly of wet wood and the faint coppery tang of rain running through gutters, yet no one was there. I stared at the image, thumb hovering over the screen. The lamp flickered in the photo exactly as it had that evening, a tiny pause in illumination that only I would have noticed. My stomach clenched. A premonition I could not name rooted me to the couch. The sound of my own heartbeat, slow and uneven, filled the silence like it belonged to the room, not me. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, but it was small and polite, almost hesitant compared to the weight of awareness pressing down from the phone. The next photo arrived 30 minutes later. Same angle, same view of the front porch, but slightly closer this time. The edges of the frame caught a movement in the corner, a shadow too fluid to be tree branches, too deliberate to be rain. I backed away from the table, letting the phone slide across the wood with a low, clattering thud. My hands shook, brushing against the cold glass of the window nearby. My reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed. I couldn't shake the sense that it wasn't really my reflection, but someone, or something, watching from behind it. I had reasons to fear intrusion. A year ago, my apartment had been broken into while I slept. Nothing was taken, but the knowledge of someone moving silently through my home had left me hollow, exposed. The sense of vulnerability never left me. I had reinforced locks, installed cameras, and yet the idea of someone observing unseen remained a festering wound in my mind. These images were proof that even all precautions could not erase the possibility. I moved through the apartment like a ghost, checking locks, checking the windows. Every surface, smooth hardwood, worn rug, cold metal doorknobs, seemed suddenly alien, alive, magnifying every sound. The tap of rain against the sill, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the shiver of air from vents. The phone vibrated again, almost politely, almost teasing. Another photo. I did not open it immediately, afraid that seeing it might make it real. But eventually, I could not resist. The image was taken from the side of the house, near the garage. My car was in the driveway, wet, reflecting the orange light from the street lamp like a pool of molten metal. A shadow stretched across the wet asphalt, impossibly long, cast in a direction that should not have existed, given the angle of the lamp. My breath caught. It wasn't moving, yet it seemed to stretch, reach toward the house. I pressed my hand against my mouth. My phone slipped from my grip and clattered to the floor. Screen up. The image glowed faintly, still unwavering. I stopped trying to rationalize. There were no explanations that fit. No human friend, no prank, no misfired notification. I lived alone. The stairs, the hallway, the small hallway closet where the air always seemed cooler. All were untouched, empty. The photos kept coming, each a new angle, each capturing a perspective I would have known, because I knew my house intimately. I began sleeping lightly, waking at intervals to check the windows. Every shuttered pane, every locked door felt like a boundary against the intrusion I could not see. Yet I could sense it. The apartment shifted subtly when I entered a room, the air heavier, the shadows darker, the floorboards ever so slightly springier underfoot. It was as though my house remembered I was being watched, as though it participated in some private, malicious choreography. One night, the phone buzzed while I was in the kitchen. Steam rose from a half-forgotten mug of tea, curling toward the ceiling in slow, twisting tendrils. I picked it up, hands shaking. The image was taken from my backyard, just beyond the fence. I had no neighbors on that side, only trees and darkness. And yet the photo showed the garden in meticulous detail. The angle of branches, the wet shimmer of leaves, the faint glint of my kitchen window reflecting faint light. I pressed my palm to the glass of the window nearest the back door. My breath fogged the surface. Outside, nothing moved. The wind stirred the trees. Rain began again, a soft drizzle that made the ground glisten. But the photo remained on my phone, glowing softly in my hands, untouched by the storm. The shadow of something or someone appeared at the corner of the frame. I squinted. I could not tell if it had moved or if I simply wanted it to exist. Days passed. I avoided leaving the apartment. I did not answer the door if the bell rang. The phone buzzed relentlessly, each image more precise, more invasive. The pattern of tiles in the kitchen, the angles of the living room couch, the small dent in the coffee table that only I knew existed. I could feel it inside me, a presence threading through the house, touching the walls and shadows, pressing my pulse into the rhythm of unseen footsteps. I began to notice other things. A smell of wet wood and iron lingered at the edges of rooms, faint but undeniable. A draft carried through the hallways that I could not trace to any window or vent. Objects shifted slightly, imperceptibly. A chair no longer aligned with the table. A rug subtly twisted. And always the phone. A silent narrator, revealing more than I wanted, insisting that I knew I was never truly alone. I stopped touching the phone. I set it in the middle of the kitchen counter, face down, and tried to ignore the faint glow under the edges. But it was not just the device. The sense of being observed persisted. Shadows shifted in the corners, always just beyond the edge of sight. Light flickered in ways that did not belong. I felt them before I saw them. A presence, patient, deliberate, pressing against the very air, folding space toward itself. One evening, I glanced at the back window. My reflection stared back, pale and anxious. But there, just behind me, a darker shape lingered, impossible, yet undeniable. I spun, but the room remained empty. The air smelled faintly of wet earth, metallic and sharp. And then my phone buzzed, face up, displaying a new image. Inside my living room. It was a photo of me, sitting at the counter, looking at my phone. I had not moved. The angles were precise, impossible. The lighting, the shadow cast by my arm, matched perfectly. I held my breath. I felt the temperature drop, the room contracting around me. I dropped the phone. The image remained, hovering on the glass, glowing faintly, like it refused to die. My reflection merged with it, and for a heartbeat, I felt the impossibility of observation. Myself observing myself, observed by something I could not see. The doorbell rang once, softly. I did not move. I dared not. The phone buzzed again. Another image. From inside the apartment. I did not answer. I did not touch it. I do not know if it is still taking photos, or if it has already moved beyond that. Sometimes, when the apartment is silent enough to hear the absence of sound, I feel a presence behind me. Watching, waiting, patient, and I know with the certainty of fear that it is still outside, or perhaps already inside, framing its view, waiting for me to make a mistake.